today we're going to be looking at the benefits of social purpose. So this is about giving meaning to your life and your work. I'm Gurpreet Singh, I'm from Ethical Reading, and I'm delighted to have a very eminent panel today of local leaders in business to talk about these incredibly important topics. We've got Marcus Johnson, Yasmina, Siadatan from Dynamic Planner. Marcus is from the Page Group. We've got Andrew Whiteaker from Boys Turner and Paul Mabbutt from Jennings. So as usual, just a quick run through in terms of what Ethical Reading is about. We're a not-for-profit community interest organisation, community interest company, and we launched in January 2018. Mission very much to help embed ethics into the way we do business in Reading to make it a better place for people to live and work. We have three core aims. We want to inspire people. They can make better choices. We want to provide the tools through events like this and through discussion and training, etc. We want to provide education so they can do that. And we do believe in working together in collaboration with our partners, our supporters, and other organisations to achieve these ends. We run a whole series of events. These are particularly for business people, but we also organise more general meetups in the evening for the general public to talk about topical issues. And actually next month in April, around the 26th of April, we've got a meetup which is going to talk about and discuss toxic work relationships and how you can manage those better. I'm sure everyone at some point in their career will have experienced not so great environments in their workplace. So how do you navigate them? How do you manage them? So that's the topic for our meetup on the 26th of April. As I mentioned, collaboration is very important, and we hope what we're doing here in Reading is start of something bigger, which we call the Ethical Cities Movement, and we hope to create a template over time which we can share with other cities. So today, as I said, where the agenda is very straightforward, I'm going to pretty soon hand over to Marcus Johnson, and Marcus is going to talk for about 15-20 minutes about his particular perspective and reflections as a senior person at the Page Group. We're going to then open up for discussions between the panelists, Yasmina, Paul and Andrew, and we'll bring Marcus into the mix as well. And then following that, we're going to have some questions from the audience. And apologies for the timings there. We're not going to keep you until 2 o'clock, I promise. So a little bit more on our speakers. Marcus is Senior Director for Michael Page, a recruitment organisation. So he has actually quite a unique perspective. Really interested to understand Marcus's thoughts on this. Paul Mabbutt is Managing Director of Jennings, which is a family-owned business, where purpose and values are very, very important. Andrew Whiteaker is a partner at Boys Turner, and he is an experienced lawyer with a broad range of experiences, which we'll bring to bear in this particular topic, and whether it supports or detracts from his business at Boys Turner. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. And of course, we've got Yasmina, who has a very interesting background. She was the winner of The Apprentice many years ago, actually not too long ago, and since then has really been a serial entrepreneur. And again, value is very important to her. So it'll be interesting to see how she's put those into practice. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over now to Marcus. I'm going to stop sharing. So over to you, Marcus.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for the invite. When Page Group joined Ethical Reading about 3 years ago, we didn't quite know what we were letting ourselves in for. But I can say that I've been extremely pleased with the support that your team have given us. And I wanted to thank you for inviting me, as you say, to say a few words on this. When I started looking at this, I have to say, I hold my hands up, I'm not an expert in this area, but I have very strong feelings, having been through an environment over many years, over 30 years, I suppose, where I've either managed or looked after customers. and have been given the opportunities myself by having leaders who gave me the opportunities in my career. So I think it's a really, really important area for us to focus on. Having looked into it, I think organisations are going to struggle over the next number of years if we are not focused on this area of social purpose. Customers are already holding us to account on their choices, where they spend their money. And what I've seen, having been in Page Group for 16 years, is now our customers, our clients, are now making their choices in terms of which companies they're going to use to do business with based on their social purpose. So I put a few slides together which I'll go through. And clearly the cost of living crisis, which is going to hit, the country has already hit, is going to make it even more important that business plays a part in taking away, I think, some of the pain that will come to some of the next generation coming through business. And I think we're going to play a major part in the next 3 to 5 years as we, as a country, go through this crisis. So hopefully I can just give you a few ideas and take you through what that looks like. So I've just simply said, what's social value and social impact? I'm sure many of you may know this already. Who are the major players in the space? What are the benefits to employers and employees? Because clearly we're all looking for a benefit to whether you work for an organisation or run an organisation. Just very quickly, the definition of social value: reducing inequality and environmental degradation. You can see that for yourself. Inequality, having a strategy as a business around reducing the income gap, gender inequality and having balanced boards, healthcare, making sure there is a policy for that in an organisation, and ensuring that we're breaking down the barriers of social class, which again is really important. And then you've got the environmental, something I think Page Group, for example, would never have thought about in the past. I mean, we basically have offices that we employ people to work out of. Why would we have thought about the local environment and what impact our offices and the choices we make will have? And then you've got all sorts of other areas as we progress as an organisation and as business. And I think the absolute key, and having come through the pandemic as many of us have, I stopped being a operational commercial leader. Well, it didn't stop, but it became less of a focus for us, and we focused more on people's mental stability, having physical activities, talking to them more about their emotional well-being, and then bedding that into the economic health of our business. I'm sure many businesses did this as well. And now we really are reaping the benefits. So we are now reaping the benefits, huge successful, share price growing, revenues growing, more jobs we've ever had. But there's still a drive, I think, to ensure that we get this social purpose piece right. Because as we know, things can change very quickly. We can go into recession very quickly, and we need to ensure that we retain our talent. So social impact, what impact are we having on our people, on communities? And I'll take you through a bit more of that. I personally, having done some work with Ethical Reading and the Chamber as the president of the Chamber of Commerce for Reading and Wokingham, I've done a huge amount locally to support local colleges, universities, and just giving people support around their next step into the workplace. So I've got personal, I suppose, as we all have, experience of doing voluntary work and other activities again, which for many people on here, the mere reason you're on here would say we are firm believers in it. I think the people who aren't on here are the challenge. So I think hopefully we can take that message away. And the sort of positive changes I think I've identified, having read up a lot on this now, is, and this came from the CEO of Social Value UK, was socials around health, community relations, family well-being. For so long, it's been company first, not family first. We said it all the time, but did we really give people the time to really focus on their family's well-being and the support? And I can take personal responsibility. I hardly ever spent time at home doing the school run, doing the pickups. And some might say, you know, I'm now in the fortunate position, at least an unfortunate position, of doing quite a lot of the pickups now and the drop-offs and cooking tea between 5 and 7 and all the things, you know, my wife used to do, and you have a real understanding. So I think we need to ensure environmental, you can read for yourselves, good air, reduction in carbon footprint. This will be a big thing for all of us going forward. We've got a strategy on it, reduction in pollution. And then the economics of this. We are interested in driving a commercial business, we all are, but I think we're now going to be judged also on the progress we're making on all the other 2 areas, the equality and how we make that money, how we finance it, what we spend it on, is it spent on good causes, all that sort of good stuff. And then creating entrepreneurship so that our colleagues, you know, the 7,000 people that work for Page Group can have a say in the way the business runs. And that's going to be absolutely crucial, regardless of size. And then hopefully that will deliver good social value. And it's going to be ever changing, ever evolving. You know, long after we've gone, probably we'll be looking at different ways of developing it, but we can only but make a start on this. So now I put just a simple playing around. It isn't separate, social, off you go. You must work in the voluntary sector, or, you know, you can't be commercially led because you're too focused on the social elements and social impact. I'm just an environmentalist. I'm just very commercial. I think as leaders, as people that run businesses, we need to bring the 3 together and have a strategy on how we then drive those values and how they overlap. And that's been a huge challenge for me and for all of us within Page Group, how we bring that together. We talked about here the UN sustainability goals. And again, if you'd have said to me a year ago, would I have even thought about looking at this? I'd have to be honest and say no, but actually, fundamentally, if we can get the basis of this right, I think that, well, you know, I've identified within that the sort of real focus around quality of education, you know, having 3 children myself, the need to ensure that they have a good education to give them the best start in life is really important. Mental health we talked about, reducing inequality and no poverty, you know, and we're about to hear with the cost of living crisis that in the United Kingdom, the 5th richest country in the world, we're about to have people who may be suffering from poverty. So again, I know this is being recorded and be shared around, and many may have seen this before. And those goals they'd like to achieve by 2030. Just in terms of the key players in this space, you've got Social Value UK on their website, Social Value Portal, and then Global Impact Investment Network. So if you're looking for ideas as to what you do and how you implement some of the strategies going forward, then that's a really good place to start. We've got to practice what we preach. Page Group, if I'd again said Page Group 5 years ago, would have invested in 5 heads who were going to be looking at our social value, I would have fallen off my chair. The only people that Page Group would have hired in the past, the people that would generally build revenue, or at least direct people that build revenue. And now there's a whole team being established who are looking at this and ensuring that we deliver our goals seriously. But just some of the things I wanted to talk about in terms of benefits to business. Clearly, better brand recognition. Again, if you can align yourself with Ethical Reading and other areas and other charitable groups, positive business reputation. And the reason this is important, because I've recruited, as I say, for 16 years, candidates now are really asking the question around what is the company that I'm about to work for? What do they give back? What can they do and what difference are they making? Increased sales and loyalty, because it's linked to clearly our customers using us based on our on what we're giving back. Operational cost savings, because we've got reduced numbers of heads leaving the whole time. Better financial performance and greater ability to attract talent, which is what I've just said, and retaining talent. They generally stay where they are if they're happy and if they feel valued. Which takes me to the next slide. And there's many, many more on here. But for somebody that works in an organisation that has a strategy on this, I do feel that my health is better. I do generally feel that my mental health is better because I can have an open conversation with my employer about how I'm feeling and I can be myself. And at the workplace. Not all the time, but most of the time. I've joined a company with purpose that has an agenda, that has a strategy. When my friends talk to me around the dinner table, I'm not, whoever they work for, an SME or a blue chip, I've not got a blank face when they're talking to us about this area. Being part of an organisation with a plan, increased job satisfaction, and non-finance elements to my CV. Ultimately, I can talk about things that are not necessarily to do with my commercial performance. I can then talk about on my CV about the support I've given locally to many businesses, which I think makes it really attractive for employers who are looking for elements that you're being involved with outside of your day-to-day job. So I won't read those out. These are just some examples of what Page Group are doing. Many of you may know Steve Ingham, the CEO of Page Group, had a skiing accident about 4 years ago now. Fit as a fiddle beforehand, is now in a wheelchair, wheelchair bound for the rest of his life, has been truly inspirational. And I think has given him, having seen it from the other side, how people with disabilities are discriminated against. He's got a real, I suppose, passion for driving this. And again, you may have seen some of the work we've done on diversity and inclusion. I've been a part of driving that for the Unity business. But again, you can go to any of these links and it will give you some ideas. So our purpose, and this will remain, is to change 1 million lives. Again, the unique nature of our business, and there'll be other recruiters in this place and other people with social value. We want to change 1 million lives by 2030. I think we've changed something like 400,000. And we used to just place people in jobs, and often we would stay with them for 8 weeks and make sure they're okay. But now we have a real purpose of making sure they're getting all the things they set out to achieve as we should in those jobs: senior management, gender diversity, meaningful global sustainability. So ensuring that we are carbon neutral by 2026 and moving into carbon negative territory by beyond 2026, hence the reason for that agenda going forward, as you can see. And you can see we have surveys. I'm sure many organisations do. If we're not, we should. They tell us what they'd like. We act on those things. We report back on those things. And I think that is really important to making sure. And again, you can read that for yourself. So you can see along the left-hand side, we've got ability at Page, age at Page, parents. So once upon a time, women at Page was really the number one thing that we focused on. And as a consequence, 50% of our leadership are female now, along with the same as normal employees as well. We've got work to do on the Unity, work to do on Pride, and with all of the other areas, I would say we're just scratching the surface in terms of what we need to do. But when we go to business, we can say we've got an agenda and we are working towards it and living those values every day. So these are some of the underrepresented groups, and again, just things, awards that we've won. Does it matter to me locally in Reading? Yes, but fundamentally, until I can have a sheet like this of awards for myself, we've still got a long way to go. And that's what I would say. It's great that the organisation are doing these things, and it really does matter. 10,000 black interns, it's hugely important. Having come from that background myself, found it difficult to get into a job, less likely to get a job, and especially if your name is not Mark or Marcus, you might find it even more difficult to get a job. Signing up to the RAISE Charter, women on boards, a whole number of things that are happening, and hopefully that gives you some ideas. That's the end of my presentation. Hopefully it wasn't over 10 or 15 minutes.
Excellent. I think Yasmina was having some problems with her sound. Can you, is the sound working now, Yasmina?
Yes, thank you. I can hear you.
Excellent, excellent. I can't see you.
Oh, can anybody else see me?
I can see you.
Oh.
Hello, everybody else. I am here, go for it.
Yes.
Oh, there you are. I was on the wrong screen because there's a little arrow which takes you to the. I was on the wrong screen there. Fantastic. So Yasmina, as a serial entrepreneur, I know values are very important to you. How you sort of put these into practice in the various businesses that I know you've been involved in over the years, and what are the challenges been actually in putting some of the things that Mark has talked about into practice?
Yes, lovely. Well, hello, good morning, everybody. Yes, I mean, so for us, business it's more than just an organisation that makes money. So it is the fabric that binds communities together, and we believe that business is more powerful than government and more powerful than society, in so much that it is the wealth creator, and with the wealth creation we can impact society in a positive way. So we believe that at the very heart of our business, even though we are a fintech, we operate in financial services, which some would argue, particularly me, that it is probably the last area of our economy in the UK that would be susceptible to the idea that it's not just all about making profit, the kind of the Freeman mantra, and that actually even financial services, well, especially financial services, because of the vast wealth that it creates in terms of UK GDP, can have a positive impact. So we believe that actually these kind of ideas have to be driven from the top. So it has to be from the board level down. It has to be from the top, and we implement these behaviours in all of our discussions and decision making. So as ever, you've got big decisions to make, and in terms of who you're going to use as suppliers, how you are going to contract with people, how you behave. And we very often find ourselves at the board table saying, well, from an ethical perspective, this is how we must behave, and that's how the decision is made, right down to the bottom level. And yes, we put it as part of our values on our website and and all that jazz, but actually it's what happens behind closed doors that is really important, and that's the behavior of an organization. So we do that. There are so many challenges. So first of all, Marcus, I loved your presentation. Thank you so much. It was really got the juices flowing on an early Wednesday morning. So thank you for that. And you talked a lot about people. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we face, because we're all in this kind of transition phase. So I think you articulated it well, Marcus, at the beginning, where you said that, we're facing a lot of challenges as a community, as a business community, particularly post-COVID, and how can we address those challenges? And there's been a big shift in the way that people view their health and well-being, and we're all working remotely. I mean, how wonderful is this? We're all on a Zoom call. A couple of years ago, we'd have all freaked out if someone had sent us a Zoom link and said join a meeting. So we're all able to do the school, well, not all of us, but some of us that are fortunate are able to do the school runs, and we're all seeing the benefits of our mental health. But there is a cultural shift that's happening, and we find that actually there are certain, the majority of our team, particularly the kind of the younger generation, so I'm 40, so the kind of the more of the younger generations truly intrinsically believe that business should be a force for social good. But there are cohorts above that are still very much of the mantra that, oh, it's all very well. I've actually had this said to me. It's all very well, Yas, but what happens if we don't hit our numbers? And it's about educating. It's about educating people within your own organisation to think about things in a different way. So we find that very challenging. And there are challenges from a budgetary perspective. So it's about making sure that you prioritise investment, which is the way that we view it, investing in all sorts of areas of our business that we know will drive bottom line, but that linear correlation needs particular thought and needs pause for explanation. So I think they're probably our two biggest challenges, I would say, that I've seen, is kind of people and making the investment, making the argument for the investment, and actually physically making the investment when the payoff can be much further down the line. And as Marcus pointed out, all those benefits that you get as a business, it's quite hard to make that that connection. But you just have to, you know, as a team, and particularly as a board, you have to all be of the understanding that it will happen.
Great, that's very interesting. So if I paraphrase it, then you know, one of the challenges is just the previous generation, people like me, who've grown up.
Well, not like you.
Well, similar generation, shall we say, who've grown up thinking, you know, business focuses around driving profit and generating shareholder value, and you know, this is a bit of a distraction, and convincing them, and at the same time, the challenge of investing in some of these areas, which Marcus mentioned very eloquently in terms of, you know, that do have a payback, but sometimes they have a long payback. You know, it's over a longer term than perhaps the typical window of business thinks about when you're thinking about returns over the next quarter or over the next 6 months or something like that. Would that be fair?
That's exactly right. And one of the things that we've done is, so we have a sort of a 5-year plan, and we work to a 5-year budget. And we've included this long-term investment over the next 5 years, and that is really powerful when it comes to decision making around investments. So we are able to realise the return on that investment over a 5-year period, and that makes us a lot more creative when it comes to investing in frameworks, for example, that require consultation, which can be very expensive, or you know, we've recently become certified carbon neutral. That was an investment. You know, these things, if you've got time, then it's much easier to make the business case, for sure. So what we've done from a practical perspective, so we all got a good nosy at your Marcus, when you couldn't switch your screen off, at the different tabs you had open. And when it comes to our budget, we have sort of 8 leaves, if you like. So there are 8 different departments in our business, and we've created a 9th leaf, which is for us is our environment and social investment, really. So we include it in all of our reporting, which is super important. So we've set up a committee. There's only 100 people in my company, so we're not massive, but we set up a committee, and it's being led by, you know, middle management, and they have to, their job over the last couple of years has been to kind of work out how we track, well, what do we want to measure? How do we measure it? And then most importantly, how do we implement change? And then, you know, how do we track that over the long term? And they have their own budget, you know, and they're fully accountable to the board. So making it as part of your management accounting is really important, and that's what drives change.
Brilliant. That's excellent, good practice. I'm sure, and I hope that sort of other businesses pick up on some of that. One of the challenges I've often heard in business is if you don't measure it, it doesn't exist. And so if, as you said, you know, if you can track progress, that means you have a baseline you can seek to improve over time. Brilliant. Thanks very much, Yasmina. I want to turn now to Paul. Paul Mabbutt, who's the managing director of Jennings. Paul, your business has values very much at its core. So how have you, what's your experience been with purpose? Do you know, what is the purpose of your business? Do you have one? Does it help? Does it hinder? Has it helped you? What's your experience been?
Okay. Well, thank you, Gurpreet, and good morning, everyone. So a bit of context, really. So as Gurpreet says, Jennings is a family business. Very much embedded in the community. You get a lot of family businesses which are based in a particular area, and they do a lot to support their local community. So slight confession, we're South Oxfordshire. So for the purposes of today, we're Greater Reading, if you like. But really admire Ethical Reading and what it's achieved. I mean, we I've sat on the dovetails of Ethical Reading, really, and learned a lot from what they've done in the Reading community, but at Thames Valley wider as well. So we're a family business. We are relatively small, unlike Yasmina and Marcus's businesses. There's only 11 of us, and we very much see our social purpose around impact. So although we're a small business, we do have quite a big impact, particularly locally. We have an impact in the environment. We have an impact in the local community. And if there's any good initiatives going in Oxfordshire, Jennings try in some way to be involved somehow. And I joined 26 years ago. And what struck me straight away when I joined Jennings was it wasn't the typical private business. You know, the culture was all about doing business the right way. And then you would see the profits. They would come as a result of being an ethical and responsible business. And that practice and that culture has developed as we've gone through. So actually having a purpose where you're an impactful business has really helped us, not just with our objections and our vision and strategy going forward, but also with our recruitment. So for those of you that don't know, we used to be, Jennings was a poultry farm and had about 50 employees and diversified in the early 80s. So we converted chicken sheds to workshops, and then we built on the land that we had, and we now have about 100 tenants over 3 sites, but our main site is in Chalgrove, and our business community is very much small and micro businesses. And going back to a point that you were discussing with Yasmina, you know, we rarely see people that set up in business to maximize profit and to become millionaires. You know, people do it for lifestyle. We have a lot of husband and wife businesses. We have a lot of entrepreneurial spirits, people that want to solve a problem. There's lots of reasons people set up in business, and the outcome is sometimes they make significant profits. So everyone that we've taken on in my time, and I've been MD for 10 years and I've been here 26 years, we've never taken on anyone in Jennings with a property background. And we're a commercial property company, which is a little bit weird, but what we do is recruit based on values and people skills. You can teach them about leases, you can teach them about business, and you can teach them about buildings and property. You can't teach people values necessarily. If it's not inherent within them, it's very, very hard to get them to fit with your culture. So everyone in Jennings comes from a variety of backgrounds, but they have to fit with the culture first of all and develop. So, and that's been incredibly successful for us. So, you know, having a social purpose around impact and how we work with the environment and people has really helped with the recruitment. And I think Marcus has said, you know, it's, you know, attracting the right people and retaining people has been significant for us. You know, we don't have a turnover of team members. And even, you know, our tenants, you know, at the 100 tenants, we're attracting like-minded tenants. They stand out like a sore thumb. If they don't have the ethics and values that Jennings have, quite often they self-select and they leave, which is great because it helps us create much more of a community, much more supportive people. And it was evident, I think, in COVID, when it was pretty scary for most people and most businesses, not knowing whether they were going to survive, not knowing, I mean, we've got about 10 businesses in the hospitality sector who just had no income for a year, and working closely with them, our relationship with them was so strong, the trust and the mutual respect was there, that we supported them through difficult times, and they were fantastic in being very open about their businesses and their challenges. So yeah, so I think it's helped us enormously, attracting the right kind of businesses, attracting the right kind of people, and still retaining the profits that help with the family shareholders.
Very interesting. So, I mean, you've had 26 years experience of this. So it's over the long term. It's not, and over, you know, through several recessions, through several ups and downs in business. So this is a strategy that and an approach that clearly has worked for Jennings and for you in terms of, you know, the essence that I get is you know, that the having a business and a purpose kind of translates into the overall culture within the organization around values, living those values, and then actually getting the right people on board, which then drives business results and business performance. Would that be fair?
Yeah, very much. I mean, it's been great the last 5 years, I think Marcus said, or someone said, last 5-10 years, there's been a real shift. A lot of people, we kept it quiet for the first 10 years because people looked at us very oddly, the way we did our business. And the fact that we ran so much on values and purpose wasn't really discussed 25 years ago when I joined the company. But it's very much evident that a lot of people are recognizing that it is fundamental now. You know, we have to be responsible and ethical. And actually, I think you tend to outperform businesses that are purely focused on short-term profits.
Yeah. And it's interesting that both you and Yasmina actually mentioned that this is important not just to your immediate business, but to the people that do business with you. So your supply chains and your partners. So, you know, when you're selecting the people that you do business, you know, these values come into the fore. So you're kind of, you know, increasing your sphere of influence, as it were. You know? Yeah,
I mean, we've attracted social enterprises and charities, and we became carbon neutral as a business last year, Jennings, and we have aspiration to become carbon neutral as a business park in Chalgrove by 2030, and that means getting all our tenants on board in terms of their buildings, in terms of their wastage, in terms of their energy use. So it's quite an ambitious target for us. So we can only work with like-minded businesses to achieve that goal, because, you know, we all recognise now that climate change it's a very serious proposition for us all, regardless of businesses, and we all have to do our bit for that. So yeah, working with the right people in the right business community is going to help us on that path.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. I want to talk to Andy Whiteaker from Boys Turner. Andy, you know, there is a, you know, a bit of a view that, you know, having a social purpose is all well and good. It's a bit of you know, it's really a nice to have more than a, you know, what's the sort of core focus of business. What's your reflections on that perspective, and also, you know, what does social purpose mean to you and to Boys Turner?
Thanks, Gurpreet. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a partner in the employment group at Boys Turner. But in addition to that, I wear the hat of the chair of the Abbey Quarter bid committee in the town centre. So I have an interest both in terms of what happens at Boys Turner, what happens to my clients and the firm's clients, but also to the local business community as well, and how we can best support them and encourage growth within the local area. And wearing all of those hats, it is my perception that having this effective social purpose is no longer just a nice to have. It is becoming increasingly more important for sort of forward-thinking businesses. And one of the reasons for that, I think, and we've heard already from Paul about how committed his organisation has been to this over an extended period of time. But I think that COVID has been an incubator, hasn't it? And it's accelerated changes that we might have perhaps expected to see over the space of a few years, 5 to 10 years. And I think this is another one of those things that has been accelerated as a result of COVID. And I think the reason for that, Marcus has already touched on this, and Yasmina as well, about how COVID has resulted in individuals looking again at their lives and their careers and what they want from their life and their careers, their employers as well, how they want to engage with them. And we can, as business leaders, pat ourselves on the back potentially about how we've weathered the storm of the last 2 years. Certainly, 2 years ago, many businesses looked aghast at what was happening and thought, well, crikey, I don't know what's going to happen next week, let alone in 6 months or 2 years' time. There's an enormous amount of change here. And although some businesses have failed, others have survived and others have thrived. But what we've been doing over the last couple of years probably isn't enough and good enough for the future. And we do now need to look at what we're doing moving forward and making our organizations fit for the future. And I think this social purpose aspect to it is one of those things that is crucially important for businesses to consider. We've heard and continue to hear about the Great Resignation. We know, you can look at any number of studies and surveys about the state of flux of the employment market. Again, Marcus will know more about that than I will. But we know that people are questioning what they're getting out of life, what they're getting out of their jobs. And with this move towards a more hybrid system of working too, my perception is that employees become slightly less sticky than maybe they were before. Obviously, businesses will do the best they can to engage with their staff and to keep them involved with the business and have as many touch points with them as you can. But most businesses are still on a bit of a learning curve about that. And it's inevitable that you're not quite as engaged, or it's difficult to engender the same sort of engagement as you had previously if people are working remotely. So those weaker bonds, the idea that if you can work from anywhere, then perhaps you can work for anyone as well. And I think businesses in the Thames Valley potentially are at a real risk, a particular risk from these sort of principles, because we've always been able to sell ourselves. We've always been able to identify our USPs of saying, well, it's great being in the Thames Valley, isn't it? Look at all the wonderful communications links that we've got. Get into London if you want to, but you can live in the countryside, and we've got fantastic schools. It's a nice place to bring up your kids, and lots of good businesses. But you don't have to go into London. You don't have to face that horrible commute on the train up every day or driving in all the traffic. But now, of course, if someone can be told, well, you can go and take that job in the city and be offered substantially more potentially than you were earning working in Reading or Bracknell or wherever it may be, but you just have to jump on that train once a week, well, then that's a decision that employees might choose to make, isn't it? Mm. So without our being able to say, well, we've got this advantage and you don't have to travel, we might fall back on, but we're great people and it's a wonderful place to be. We're really cohesive and we do our bake sales and everyone loves being together. Oh, hang on a minute, but we're not really together, are we? Because we're all sat in our spare bedrooms at home. So you lose that cohesion as well. So businesses need to think, okay, so what is our purpose? What is our sell? Because there will always be that bigger fish out there that can offer more money, better benefits, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're not always going to be able to compete on price in terms of retaining and recruiting your staff, and we've also touched upon the issue about customers and what your clients and customers expect of you now as well. If you just focus on your staff and your potential future staff, what's your sell? Why should someone work for you? What do I gain out of just a salary from engaging and working for this particular business? This is very anecdotal, I accept. So this is by no means scientific. But my wife is also a lawyer, and yes, our dinner parties are riveting. But she left private practice after about 20 years during the pandemic and has started working for the Environment Agency. And she cannot speak highly enough of the experience, the engagement that they have, the messages that comes down from the top management level to everybody, and also the feeling that she's doing some good. You know, she's not just generating profit for shareholders or directors, and she's not increasing the bonuses and the benefits that the senior management receive. She's actually doing something for society in the work that she does. Now, I accept, of course, that not every business is able to point at the reintroduction of beavers into the local area, the flood defences that they put up to save local communities from flooding. It's not as easy as that for everybody, but that doesn't mean that we can't try, and that doesn't mean that every business can't look at the way that they operate and the good that they're trying to contribute to society, because I think it is becoming increasingly important for all of the reasons that the speakers that have come before me have touched upon, for both employees and your potential clients as well. And I accept what Yasmina was saying about how it's sometimes difficult to convince people, and there's issues around, well, where's the return on this? But you don't have to necessarily look at it on a pure profitability level. I know Gerpert's already said it's difficult if you can't measure it, it doesn't count. But it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be seen as profitability being the inevitable outcome, or this is a focus on increasing profitability by behaving in this way. But profitability will perhaps come along as a side effect of having these positive social purposes that we look to incorporate in the way that we do business. So in short, yes, I think it is becoming, it's moving further and further away from just it's a nice additional thing to have, and isn't it something that we can stick up on our website, or we can post on LinkedIn, and becoming more something that's it's crucial to business success. And that's also because it's more than just doing those occasional bake sales or running the occasional half marathon. Yeah, that's great, well done, and I'm not denigrating those at all. In fact, we had a cake sale for Ukraine in the office just the other day. So those things are good and they should continue. But actually, both customers and employees can look past that, can't they? They can look through it. Yes, okay, you do occasionally go along to the odd charity event and you do the odd quiz night and everything. That's great, but what else? What more are you doing? What goes through the very heart of your organization? Are you just nodding in the general direction of CSR, or is this actually something that you live? And I think people and customers are sophisticated enough to see that and to judge businesses as to whether this is something they really believe in, or whether it's something they're just paying lip service to.
It's a great point, actually, Andy, right at the end, which is the difference between real focus on social purpose and giving back to the community, social impact that we've heard from Paul, Yasmina, and Marcus, versus traditional CSR, which is quite often driven by reputational needs, if you like, or marketing needs, and to be seen to be doing something, as opposed to really being driven by inner values, if you like, in terms of your motivations there. You want to say a little bit more about that? Because I think that's quite an interesting area.
Well, yes. I mean, a friend of mine that I used to share a house with set up a recruitment consultancy, and I think I helped him fill out the forms of incorporation best part of 20 years ago. And his recruitment consultancy was going to specialize in CSR. And at the time I said, what the hell is that? What's that? And he had to talk me through it and explain. I said, is there going to be enough work to just have a recruitment consultant just focuses on CSR? Oh yeah, no, definitely. It's the coming thing. Okay, fine. So obviously he's massively proved me wrong, and he's a hugely successful entrepreneur these days. And I was wrong to be skeptical. But it's a principle that has been around that long, and perhaps before even then. And people have recruited CSR individuals into their business, and it has formed part of business strategies. But as you said, Gurpreet, it is focused primarily on being seen to do the right thing. Being, responsible, making sure you're recycling, making sure that you do engage with the local community, and you seem to be sponsoring events and that kind of thing, which is great. And I'm not denigrating that, and I'm not suggesting those things should not be continued. But social purpose is, as I said, it's more than that, isn't it? Because it's actually saying, well, look, we're at a very fundamental level. We're asking ourselves, what is the reason for our existence? What is it that we're trying to achieve? What is it that we're trying to contribute to society? Again, I was discussing this with my wife last night, and she was saying, well, what can you say as a law firm? I said, thanks very much. But there are things that you can say, aren't there, I think? Whether or not it's actually contributing and supporting the more vulnerable in society, whether it's reaching out and doing pro bono work and free of charge work to support those individuals who may not be able to access legal services elsewhere. But even in terms of the work that we undertake on a commercial basis for our commercial clients, that doesn't mean that we can't take an ethical standpoint, and it doesn't mean that we can't say, well, look, what we're trying to do is actually trying to improve the lot of our clients, to enable them to work in an efficient and effective manner, to maximize the good that they also to contribute to society as well. And then another aspect to it as well is the support that we provide to our employees too. So the fact that we are supporting them, that we are understanding of their concerns, we're taking into consideration all of those factors that Marcus spoke about to begin with, their social well-being, but their physical well-being as well, and their career development too, and encouraging them to develop their careers and to be successful and to contribute into society. So, me being the heartless, bloodthirsty lawyer that I am, even I'm able to establish and think about some things that my firm can say that, there is a social purpose behind what we try and do. So I think it is true of all businesses that we can do it. And like I said, it goes beyond just doing those occasional fun runs, and it's actually going to the very core of who you are and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to contribute to society.
Brilliant. Thanks. Thank you very much, Andy. I want to come back to Marcus again. And I know this is kind of perhaps repeating a point, but I think it's important because this is the common objection that we often get from people and from organizations. And as I said, typically from people of my generation, that actually this is a distraction. This whole thing around social purpose, this whole thing around having large programs in terms of social impact is a distraction from the core purpose of business, which is wealth creation, which is around shareholder value, and creating greater wealth for the country as a whole, for the people who work for the organisation. And actually that is a good in itself, and that is a social good in itself, and that's the primary focus. How would you respond to, what would be your kind of response to that, Marcus?
Well, I'd start by saying I think Yasmina, Paul and Andy and yourself have covered it, so I'll try not to sort of repeat many of the things that have already been said, because it's really eloquent, and I think everybody on here fundamentally understands the value of driving this agenda. But I fundamentally disagree. I think the thing is, I've worked for shareholders or through directors who have shareholders and boards who have fundamentally believe that shareholder value is the only thing that matters. And when I was growing through the organisation, I couldn't quite understand that. I was uncomfortable with it. Sort of all decisions, whether it's cost-cutting, redundancies that were being made to sort of drive profit and shareholder value, I just didn't feel comfortable. It was delivering worse service to the customer. Clearly, the people that were in that organisation at the time felt awful, so they went out into the community. So there were less people to do all the value-add stuff that actually attracts revenue into the region or into our market. So I could never understand it, but in the end, our share price grew and everybody got big bonuses and everybody was happy, apart from the people on the ground. So I have to say, I fundamentally have disagreed for about 30 years in the way that business is operated. So I'm finally grateful, and my wife will be, that I've got a voice somewhere where I can let all this frustration out about it. But I also think that, yes, there does need to be an agenda. I think we do need to be held to account. I think, it isn't just saying that, go off everybody for 50% of your time and don't worry about the things you need to do to drive profit. But I think there's an element where we need to give people opportunity, time, and probably as a board of directors or business owners, where we're leading from the front. And the other thing I've noticed is people don't want to be told to be more diverse. They don't want to be told to go and do more voluntary work. They want to see their leaders getting out and doing it. And then, hey, presto, they tend to follow behind you to do some of those things. And again, makes it so much easier when you're talking about your business to potential employees. If you're saying, I've done this, not we as a business do this, I've done this, we do this, it makes a huge difference. So off the back of that, I think a healthy economy clearly depends on a healthy planet, right? I think if we, again, go back to COVID, most of us sat in our areas, our houses in Reading going, oh, what, Ebola somewhere in Africa, that's not going to affect us. Aren't I lucky? And then all of a sudden COVID came and we realized some of that happened or we think happened in China, then came over to the UK pretty quickly. And we noticed what it did fundamentally to the economy, closed it down with all the catastrophic effects that had. So I think everybody recognises now a healthy planet equals a healthy society and equals people wanting to spend money, happy to spend money, on the things that matter to them. And hopefully the things that matter to them in the future will be things that make the economy better, and make the environment better and makes their life better. So I think it goes back to my diagram, I think, out of those three areas. I fundamentally disagree, basically, so I'll shut up now.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Marcus. I'd like to open up at this point to sort of the general audience, but I'm going to pick a person out in particular from the audience that I've noticed is with us today, because they have a particular perspective on this. So are you there, Emma? Emma Borg.
Hi, Gerprit. Sorry, I wasn't expecting to be called on there. No, getting to my microphone.
Brilliant. I just noticed you were there, and I thought, wow, excellent. So the reason I picked out Emma is that Emma is from the University of Reading, has actually done a couple of sessions for us and has been involved in some of our activities around code of ethics as well, and co-developed that with us. But more importantly, Emma's done some research into what's called the social contract. So perhaps, Emma, you can just say a few words around that, and where is your project, and what you've heard from, our speakers and panelists today. What are your reflections on that?
Okay, thanks. Just putting me on the spot there. I wanted to say, first of all, thanks very much to all the speakers. It's been really interesting. So as Gerprit mentioned, I'm an academic, and often we work away in the ivory tower and we don't get to speak to business people all that often. And it's really nice to hear the way that these ideas are getting taken up and put into practice and really operationalized in the workplace. That's fantastic. It's fantastic to hear so much positivity around these ideas, I think. I guess maybe one thing I was thinking, kind of picking up on some of the things Andy was saying about CSR. So one of the things we've tried to argue in our research, I guess, is that social purpose is kind of pretty different to CSR, that CSR really is about the kind of bake sales and the marathon running and the general kind of philanthropy. And obviously, you're right, general philanthropy, that's great. But one of the things that started our research on the notion of social purpose was we got into this area around the financial crisis. And when we went in and started talking to some of the banks and seeing what kind of activities they'd been engaged in, it really struck us that some of the firms that had been responsible for some of the, worst kinds of behaviours had their values written the biggest on their websites and in their lobbies. And, they had great statements of value, and they also had huge CSR wings. But the CSR wing was, over there, it's at the bottom of the corridor, and they organise the bake sales and the runs, and they don't get involved in the day-to-day running. And I think what really struck us was that a properly ethical company needs to have a notion of purpose that embeds throughout the company and infects what people do in their day-to-day lives. And I think that strikes me as the difference between kind of CSR, which is we've got a branch over there and it does some good, versus social purpose, which is about, as you said, Andy, driving this idea of the value of the company and asking ourselves, why does the company exist? And I think you're exactly right that any kind of firm can have a social purpose and should have a social purpose, because, if it hasn't got a reason to exist that goes beyond making a profit, then that's a pretty terrible state of affairs. And also, doing the right thing is also about not doing the wrong thing. So at the very least, companies can have statements about how they're going to avoid doing the wrong thing. And that's as true in, financial services or the legal sector or anywhere. So, I think that's probably what I would say, Gerprit. I don't know if that's what you were looking for.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Just very keen to get your perspective. Let's open up to any questions, basically. Who would like to ask panelists a question or two? Don't be shy. And if you prefer, you can put the question into the chat window. I think, Emma, you had a question?
I had a question, yeah. So really, I just had a quick question about kind of ethics washing issues. So I now can't remember which speaker it was, sorry, but someone said, customers can see through just kind of people who write up their values on their website and then don't live them. And also Yasmina mentioned that what really matters about making ethical decisions is what happens behind closed doors. But obviously that makes transparency a bit of an issue, right? So, and if we're in an era where customers are really looking for firms that are doing the right thing, it's going to become useful for firms who don't want to do the right thing to at least say they're doing the right thing. So I just wondered whether people had any suggestions about those kinds of issues around sort of ethics washing.
Do you want to take that one first, Yasmina, and then perhaps Andy after that?
Yeah, I can have a go. So Emma, lovely to see you. So it's so poignant in our industry. So in financial services, greenwashing it gets just as big a headline as ESG. So for those of you that don't know, ESG has absolutely blossomed in the last 3 or 4 years. So this is where sort of both retail and institutional investments in the UK, if you wanted to invest in something that was impact or ethical, they used to call it, then, you know, again, you'd be out on the wing, and you'd have to compromise on returns, performance. Whereas now, actually, this was pre-COVID, this started. So it was around the kind of the whole Attenborough and Greta Thunberg movement, really, where kind of ESG became very popular. But there was a lot in the press about greenwashing, and all ESG is it's about making sure that publicly limited funds are accountable to the S and the G, so the E and the S and the G, as well as profit. And greenwashing is a problem. So we work, for example, with 180 asset managers, and they are all rebranding their multi-asset funds from being based on investment returns and past performance and look how much money you're going to make, into we are an ESG fund, or they call them a sustainable fund or an impact fund, and then we could talk about the kind of the naming of all of this and how that negatively impacts on greenwashing as well. But it's my view. So in terms of how do we guard against it, and how do we ensure as businesses and consumers that we are not falling into the trap of believing these messages, is that we are, unfortunately, there's no silver bullet, right? We are on a journey. We are going through a massive transition phase, and it is the responsibility of all of us, whether we're running these businesses and rebranding our investment funds. It's about actually the ethics of the individuals and making sure that individuals behave in the right way. And if we can get people really understanding the true value of it, and then unfortunately that is the only way that we're going to affect change. And we can do everything around the edges. We can create laws. We can try and put in measures. You know, the government can force us to do these things. We can put tax breaks on it, so as consumers it's cheaper for us to, you know, and we have to do all of those things to make change. But most importantly, we have to do things like what we're doing today. You know, as individuals, we have to affect change in our own personal lives and the lives of the people that we work with and the lives of people we collaborate with, because greenwashing is it's an umbrella term for, in my opinion, it's an umbrella term for all things unethical and untruthful. So actually not doing what you're saying you're supposed to be doing. And so you're always going to get crooks and cheats at the edges. It's never going to disappear. You know, that's just society. But yeah, it's an interesting subject. I don't know if I've answered the question whatsoever. So sorry, Emma. But yeah, some food for thought there, I hope.
I think that was a great answer. Thank you very much, Yasmina.
Do you have any reflections? Do you want to add anything to that, Andy?
Well, as a humble employment lawyer, my focus is primarily on sort of interactions between employers and employees. And I think I'd go back to some of the points that you actually made, Emma, around having values written on the walls, but then not actually living by them. And really going back to the idea that any focus on social purpose needs to be a top-down approach, because if you stick those values up on the wall and you tell everyone this is what you're going to do, and then managers are not seen to be leading that approach, and or they are behaving or conducting themselves in an entirely different way. If all you hear from your leaders is a focus on profitability and nothing else, and it's all about the money, then people can see through, as I said, those bake sales and those half marathons. You don't believe that the company is actually, or the organization is actually committed to what they say they are committed to. And you know that has arguably an even worse effect on staff morale than if you didn't bother with this sort of thing in the first place. You know, it's one thing to claim that you're doing something and then not do it. Another thing to just not bother at all. And you know, if you're trying to motivate your staff and convince them that this is the place to be, they want to be working for you because you have this higher social purpose and you're trying to contribute to society. But in reality, all that the employees can feel is that they're working towards increasing their the bonuses or the dividends of the shareholders at the end of the day, and they might see a marginal piece of that share, whether it be by way of a bonus or some sort of pay rise, and that's frankly demotivating, really. So, from my employee perspective, it's more about actually just walking the walk, I suppose, and from top down to be actually living these principles rather than just paying lip service to it.
Super. Any other questions?
I was just going to say very quickly off the back of Andy and Yasmina, there's two things we've done that have really changed the way we operate. One would be reverse mentoring. So we've introduced reverse mentoring with the main board. It always happened at middle management, but actually now the main board have got mentors, and also creating a shadow board who now attend from every level the main board meeting. And believe me that the shadow board haven't held back. If they don't believe the organisation is going far enough, or if they've not committed to something, I think they're inspirational. Some of the people, they're lower level than me, holding the CEO and the CFO to account on things and are brave enough to speak out. And I think they're two things I think have made a real change to the organisation.
Interesting, very interesting. If other organisations have tried those, is that something that you're, Andy, Yasmina, others on the line are looking at in terms of approaches to get a different perspective? We talked about the younger generation that's coming into the workplace having a greater focus on values and purpose, the environment and so on, and things like reverse mentoring, shadow boards are a couple of ways that actually those views can be aired to quite a senior level, perhaps, and influence direction. I think that's a great initiative. Are other organisations looking at this?
No, but I'm definitely going to write. I've written the note down, Marcus. So I'm definitely going to have a look at that. Yeah, that's a brilliant idea, and thank you.
Is that something, Marcus, that you could share some links or some information to people on?
Absolutely. There's somebody called Sherry Hughes, our D&I director, who has driven all of the change around our D&I strategy. Started about 10 years ago, and she's at the forefront of it all and runs it all. So, Yasmina, I'm happy to put you in touch with her. She meets all the customers who I have this conversation with to give them some insight, and she's great to talk to on the subject. So happy to do that.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. So that's an open offer to everyone here. And as I said, we're all about collaboration, encouraging collaboration. So thank you very much, Marcus. And if you do want to learn a little bit more about shadow boards and reverse mentoring, then Marcus is your man. Thanks very much, Marcus. I noticed, David, you're on the line as well. David Thomas from Vale Williams, one of our partners. What's your perspective on what you've heard? And is this something that's close to sort of what Vale Williams believes in and puts into practice? And how do you go about it?
Absolutely. About 5 or 6 years ago, we looked at our values, which was staff-led, bottom-up, and we came out with we listen, we lead, we innovate. We listen, we lead, we innovate, and I've forgotten the last one, which is really embarrassing. But in all of our recruitment, in all of the discussions that we have, any of the staff members are able to challenge one another if we are not living within our values, and that those conversations are very much part of our day-to-day life. Now, as I say, in the interviews we will ask for examples from people where one of our values is that we care. Can you give an example of when you have cared or when you have innovated? So you very much see the character of somebody that's coming through. And I was interested in terms of what Paul was talking about as a property business of not recruiting people with a property background and can talk about, can teach them the leads. We're in a slightly different perspective, but very much the recruitment is somebody going to fit in with the business, live our values, and ultimately behave in a way which is our ultimate goal of being trusted advisors, and that runs through everything that we do.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, David. I'm going to turn to Clinton now. Clinton, the reason I'm coming to you is because we've talked about, a number of people have talked about the importance of purpose, impact of purpose on culture, and then the importance of all of that in terms of who you hire, and then in terms of retention. And the fact is, of course, it's people that make a business, and it's people that drive results. And you've spent, over 40 years in people management. What is that relationship between, highly motivated teams and values and culture? I think you've got some interesting data around that.
Yeah, first of all, an admission, I brand myself as the HR anarchist. I believe one of the fundamental changes we've got to make in businesses is rethink some of our HR tactics. We're still implementing processes and systems in organisations that worked brilliantly in the 50s and 60s, and they don't actually fit with where we are now. But answering directly Gurprit's question, some of the research I've done with Dr. Marciano, when we were looking at why is it you can take a group of stunningly mediocre people, and I'm talking about technical talent, and they can absolutely smash any goals that you want to achieve, and you can take a group of what we'd often define as top talent, and they struggle. And what we found was that there's something incredibly powerful in organisations, which is the level of respect that you have between individuals, the level of respect that they show for the organisation and its purpose, the level of respect they show for the team they work in, the level of respect that they show for the concept of leadership, and more importantly, do they go home every night feeling respected? And at the core of some of these things is really this level of respect, and that comes down to what's the quality of the interactions between individuals within your organisation. And we often talk about the importance of diversity, but what's really important is inclusion. And you can set policies, procedures and systems that will address diversity. But until those people coming into the organisation go home every night feeling that they were respected, that their opinions were valued, and that they made an individual contribution that was worthwhile, I think organisations are going to struggle. And what we're seeing is, I think organisations are beginning to realise that. And it's coming down to looking at, how are we making these decisions around these people? A number of you have talked about the importance of managers and how they support the purpose of the organisation. If we keep promoting the best programmer to be the manager of the programmers, we keep promoting the best accountant to be the leader of the accountants, without thinking about what's the quality of the interactions these people are driving, what messages are they sending to the people who are reporting to them, and are they really supporting the purpose of the organisation, I think we're going to continue to struggle. So I think, a lot of these things, yes, it's got to be top down, but equally, we've got to stop putting in place systems and processes in organisations that drive the contra behaviour.
Super. Brilliant. Thanks very much, Clinton. We have we have a little bit more time. Any final questions?
This Graham Roberts here. Sorry, just one question. You talked about if you measure it, then something will happen. It's been my experience over the years that as soon as you start to measure something, things do happen. So what measurements have or KPIs have been introduced into the speakers' companies to help promote what we've been talking about today?
So I think, Yasmina, you mentioned that you've got a team that's looking into this in terms of what to measure, how to measure it. Can you sort of shed some light a little bit there? Can you share some details?
Yeah, of course. So we look at it in terms of what we're doing internally as a team, and then what we're doing in terms of our organisation and how we're developing product. So in terms of the environment, that's fairly easy. So, you know, our carbon footprint, we measure and we outsource that, and that's done through various different pieces of quantitative measurement. And then we also measure, you know, how much basic things. So, you know, how much paper are we purchasing? How many batteries are we recycling? You know, just to keep a tab to make sure that everybody is, everyone's feet are being held to the fire in terms of how they're personally using their own resources. I think a more complex measure for us has been, and then on the societal side, you know, we measure how many days of charity. So everybody's allowed 2 days of charity off a year. We measure how much of that is being taken up, and then we measure the impact of the charity work that they're doing, and that's all collected on a qualitative and a quantitative basis. We measure the amount of money that we've raised, you know, so simple quantitative things. I think what's really interesting is when it comes to our own product development and how we positively impacting society and the environment in terms of how we are using our own product to facilitate change in this area. And that is interesting. So, for example, what we have every month, we had ours yesterday, actually. We get the whole executive management team together physically in a room, and we all have half an hour to talk through our area of the business, and it's all KPI led, so it's led by the numbers. And as part of that, we have sustainability, and each different area of the business has to measure, depending on how whether you're in marketing, whether you're in product implementation, you know, we're a technology company, you have to come up with your own KPI that you and your team are accountable for, and every month you have to track against that and report back to your peers. So it depends on whatever department you're in and what part of the business you're running. But I absolutely agree that, you know, coming up with the KPIs and being able to measure them is a way to affect change, and it absolutely sharpens everybody's focus.
Does that answer your question, Graham? Cool. I mean, the other thing in terms of measurement that Marcus mentioned, which is a very good framework, is the United Nations SDG goals. Now, admittedly, they were originally designed for governments, but it's interesting that increasingly they are being adopted by organisations. So I know one of our partners, for example, Shoesmiths, uses that framework, and a number of other partners do as well, to measure their progress across a number of different areas. So, of course, there are 17 SDGs. They're not all of them aren't applicable to every business. So what typically happens is, you know, businesses will select which ones are appropriate for them. But actually, if you dig into you know, the ones that are appropriate for your business, you'll find on the United Nations websites suggested measures, you know, suggested KPIs for those goals, and then that's the starting point for you to tailor them for your particular business. So there is some support there for businesses. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I have learned a lot from our panelists and our audience, so I'm in a better position to be able to articulate and talk about business purpose and why it is you know, a positive thing for business, both in terms of performance and in terms of social impact. So this has been a fantastic session. Thank you very much to our lead, Marcus, for setting the scene so eloquently. Thank you, Marcus, for that. And to our panelists of Andy, Yasmina, and Paul. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you again shortly. Take care.